there, friends. Hello. I'm so excited to be back. It's a different time. Okay, so I'm easing into 2023 and kind of figuring out a few things and how much I want to share and all the different tutorials I want to do weekly. So I thought we would pop in today. I'd pop in today and we'd do something super easy breezy with a new stamp set mashup. So I'm seeing people pop in. I know I changed the time today, so it's a little bit different. I'm just trying some new things and seeing what might work. I love doing the lunchtime hour as well, but so happy New Year from Maryland. It is like, let me check the degrees. It is 56 degrees here, ridiculously weirdly warm. Not great if everybody has allergies and sinuses. But anyway, hello, Wilma. Hello, Sue. Hello, Michelle. Hi, Debbie. It's so good to see everyone in here. I hope everyone had a really great holiday season and new year. Okay, today I've got a really fun stamp set mashup with New Beginnings from my Gina K Designs line and Happy Life. And we're going to do some watercoloring, kind of like some no-line watercoloring. So I'm going to dive right in and get to it. I'm hoping we'll stay within the hour. We might go over the hour. You never know, right? Okay, so if you have questions along the way, just pop them in the chat. And I'll do my best to answer them, or we'll have a little Q&A in the end, which is always good. Wendy said it's 7:30. She's still in her 7:30 a.m. still in their PJs. I thought about that. We do have a lot of West Coast and Midwest folks that join us on these lives, and I was like, oh, I'm going a little early today. It's going to be a little early there. So anyway, that's okay. We're easing into 2023, right? Who feels like bulls rushing into it? Not me. I'm kind of easing in. So a lot of fun things to share. Got a couple things I want to share at the end too. So let's go ahead and let's dive in and let's just get started. Okay, so here are the two stamp sets that we're working with today. I'm using New Beginnings. I see more people popping in. And Happy Life. These are two of my stamp sets in the Gina K Designs line. They were done in 2 different years, but they do coordinate with each other. And I'm going to be using the big Luna Moth, some of the Leafery. I'm going to be using the Galaxy of Stars. And over on Happy Life, I'm going to be using the Leafery elements. There are free download sheets for both of these stamp sets that you can get. If you aren't familiar with the free downloads that I do for every single Gina K Designs release, you can find them on my website at indigojadeart.com, and you'll see the word freebies right at the top, and you can find them all there. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So those are the two stamp sets that I'm working with. I've got the paper I'm working with today. I'm working with Strathmore Ready Cut Watercolor, and I'm using something a little different today. For my card base, I'm using these 100% cotton cold press paper card bases from Arteza. And here they are, because I want to do some watercoloring right on the card base. So and this is an oversized card. So this is a 5 by 6.9. So like an A4, I'm not sure, a 5 by 6.9. You could take a piece of watercolor paper and cut it into an A2 size if you wanted to do this tutorial, or if you happen to have some larger watercolor paper, maybe you have the Arteza paper that you want to use. Okay, so that's what we're going to be using for paper stock. I've got some other things here. I've got the companion dies, and I've got 2 brushes here. And I've got some Inktense pencils. And I've got some Daniel Smith paints that I'm going to talk about. Sue just said she ordered a couple of the stamps and dies from the end of year sale. Yeah, if you got an opportunity to take advantage of the end of year sale that Gina had, holy smokes, that was a good one. And I had quite a few bundles in there So if you got an opportunity to take advantage of that, that's fantastic. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the inspiration for today. Here is, okay, a couple things, and I'll get to the inks and all the things that we're going to be using. Also, all of the products are listed down below in the description. Here is the painting that I did several years ago of this Luna moth. And it was the inspiration for the entire stamp set that I ended up creating for Gina K Designs like a year later after I had painted this. So it just kind of showed. Thank you, Linda. The 5x7 is an A7. I knew A4 was wrong, but that's what popped in my head. But thank you so much for sharing that. Usually when I'm painting, the inspiration never leaves me, and it ends up turning into something else. And often it turns into me wanting to create something that our stamping and paper crafting community can use to create with. And that's what happened with this Luna moth, although I drew her a little bit more whimsical. So another quick not funny story, but interesting story, maybe might be interesting to you. My daughter wanted to get a tattoo with me, and we'd been talking about it for a couple years. And she wanted to do the Luna moth. She's always loved this painting. She was a little bit younger when I did this painting. She's always loved the Luna moth. I've always loved the Luna moth. Flowers and flutters are kind of my thing, as you know, if you've been around my channel or you've looked at anything I've ever posted. Flowers and flutters are my thing. And the Luna moth has a great deep meaning for me. So she said, let's do this. And I said, oh, okay, go ahead and schedule the appointment with the artist that we love. And, you know, I left it all on her to do. So she did. She scheduled the appointment. I'm going to come back to that front camera real quick. She scheduled the appointment, told me when it was going to be, put it on our family calendar. And I said, okay, we'll just go. It's just something fun that we're going to do together. And then she ended up sending the artist my Luna moth illustration. And we got it together. And so I was stunned that she sent the Luna moth illustration to the artist because she loved it so much. I loved it so much. It meant so much to both of us. And the artist just elevated it. So super fun. Just wanted to share that with you all because it was just a fun thing that happened with me and my daughter at the beginning of December. Just a little something special, and just another reason for the inspiration for this whole entire set. It started with a painting, then it became a stamp set, and today we're going to do some fun painting with it. So that was the inspiration. Let's go ahead and move that to the side. Here's what we're going to make today. Okay, so here's that really fun Arteza A7, thank you, Linda, A7 card. And I wanted to do a little bit of no-line watercoloring, talk about greens and metallics. We've got this metallic thing going here. And do a little bit of just a splashy kind of card, just for fun, to ease back into 2023. The other thing about that Arteza card, the blank watercolor cards, is that they come with envelopes. So that's the A7 card with the envelope. So if you also wanted a card set and you weren't going to do watercolor, but you wanted something that was heavyweight, this could be good too. This could be really fun. Okay, so let's dive in. I want to talk a little bit about the greens that we're going to be using today. As you know, and many of you, and I'm seeing all these familiar names, many of you know that I've been talking about Inktense probably a lot over the last couple weeks, and I'm going to use them again today. So here's the Inktense that I'm going to be using. We're going to use dark aquamarine, bamboo green, and light olive, these three colors right here. And then these three watercolors are from Daniel Smith. Green Apatite Genuine, Serpentine Genuine, and Cascade Green. Cascade Green is one of my favorite watercolors from Daniel Smith. And I'm going to bring it up and just see if I can get this to focus in. I'm a little close. The beautiful thing about that color is that when it dries, you get a little bit of granulation. You get a lot of granulation. And granulation means when the watercolor pigments separate, and then you get a bunch of different colors. And that's what happens with the Serpentine Genuine and the Green Apatite Genuine as well. So love these three colors. We're going to do a mix. We're going to mix watercolor and Inktense together today and paint our Luna. So let me go ahead and move this over. I see a couple questions. Kathy McConnell, I just have the Luna Moth die. Going to have to freehand the details. No, not scary, Kathy. You can do it. You can totally do it. Here, I'm going to bring this up. This is the Luna Moth. Okay. I'm just going to let everybody screenshot that. Kathy, you can screenshot that if you want, just so you have a good sense of what that looks like if you're going to freehand. The Luna Moth die. This is the die. It's fantastic to just use by itself, and you could totally freehand inside of it. But another thing I want to share with you is that, Kathy, if you are, I did this painting. Now this Luna is smaller, a lot smaller and different, has different kind of wing details. I did this painting several years ago, I think 2020 or 2019. And it is part of my art exploration free class on my in my classroom at craftyourjoy.com. This is in there. There's a lesson on this Luna Moth. So I also have a free download in there with a reference. So that might help you if you don't have the stamp set. Okay. All right. So I have pre-stamped my big honkin' Luna Moth down onto my cardstock. Now I am using, again, the Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor in cold press. Everybody knows I'm kind of obsessed with that. I pre-stamped that down in light spruce. Here are the other two ink colors that I'm using, dark spruce and grass green. Now I understand that dark spruce and light spruce are out of stock right now, but that's okay. If you don't have them, you can use any other kind of greens or blue greens for your project. Now, I want to, before we start to paint her, I want to take a little bit of paper here, and I want to talk about the Inktense, and I want to talk about the colors that we've got here. So let me just move a few things around. Then we're going to do a little bit of Washi watercolor. Oop, don't want that brush. Well, yeah, maybe I do. Okay, so I'm going to bring my colors in here. So here are some of my colors. Now, the Daniel Smith Cascade Greens. Here's the Cascade Green, and here's the Green Apatite Genuine. Let me make sure my lens is working here. Seems a little blurry to me. Okay. So I also have them in a pan set. So that's what makes them kind of fun too. So this right here, this color right here is the Green Apatite Genuine. Love that green. A lot of these Daniel Smith greens, Daniel Smith has a lot, very common. I'm sure that a lot of you have heard of them. Very common watercolor here in the US, made on the West Coast. Love them. Absolutely love them. I love a lot of watercolors. Here's Cascade Green. This is one of my favorites. Look, I just got it all super wet. These are three great Luna Moth colors. So, got a little messy here. That's okay. And what we're going to do today is we're going to mix some of the traditional pan watercolors with the Inktense pencils. Now, the difference between the Inktense pencils and watercolor pencils are that the Inktense pencils, these are ink. Okay, so they act a lot like watercolor. This color right here is light olive. They work a lot like a colored pencil. They act a lot like watercolor pencils. They behave, not act, behave a lot like watercolor pencils. They're really intense. So see how that pigment releases very, very well. Oh, I love them. But the beautiful thing about these, I'm just doing all three colors down so that everybody can see. The beautiful thing about the Inktense is that they're permanent when they dry, so they won't lift. Oops, I didn't clean my brush between that. They're permanent when they dry. They act, I'm mixing these two together. They act a lot like watercolor. They're really super, super vibrant. And these three colors are a great match for those three Daniel Smith colors. They are ink, so they dry permanent, and it's ink, which is why I love them so much, and which is why we're going to use them together with watercolor. And I'm going to show you how. Okay. All right. I just kind of diverted off a little bit so that we could play a little bit with that color. So let's get started on our card base, and I'm going to talk you through some things. And if you have questions along the way, don't hesitate to ask. I have the card base. This is the Arteza card base. Oh geez, we've got a spammer in here. Let me ban them. There we go. Okay, got it banned. Sheesh. Sorry about that. Yeah. If that spammer continues to show up, even though I banned them, you know, if we'll just try to make that not happen. Sorry about that, friends. I tell you, I must have said something that triggered those bots. So you often have to watch your words on YouTube. I don't know what I said, but sometimes it'll trigger a bot. Anyway, we're getting started with this Luna Moth, and I'm just using a little bit of the light spruce. Now, the whole purpose of me stamping, I'm just stamping this Luna Moth on here, and you can see I'm not pushing real hard. I just want to get a light stamp of the Luna Moth. I'm stamping it down here because we're using it for positioning, because now we're going to have some fun. I'm going to get the paper wet. We're going to drip in some of these fun Daniel Smith colors, and we're going to create that drip, and I'm going to show you how to create that drip. And I just remembered that I need to bring my spray bottle in because we're going to do a little bit of spraying. So what I have found from this paper is that it is a good card base for some light water work. If I go and I'm a little bit too intense with it, it will buckle a little bit. So right now I'm just adding some water, and I may just kind of spray in a little bit of water. Okay, just really light wash of water. And then I'm going to come in with some of that Cascade Green. Now I have Cascade Green here in this pan. I also have it kind of duped out. Look at that color. One of the beautiful things about a lot of the Daniel Smith colors, I'm just dropping this in. This might freak some of you guys out, because look, I'm just dropping it in and letting it flow where the water goes, and I'm letting these drips happen. Now if I want to elongate that drip, look, I'm just gonna open up that floodgate a little bit. Open up that floodgate and let that drip a little. I'm going to let it drip all the way off. And just kind of look at the greens. What I want you to see in that Cascade Green, let's see if I can get that. There we go. Turn that a little bit. Is how that some of those greens are coming up and some of those blues are coming out. Let me get that right here. Just let that be the way it is. Now I'm going to take a little bit, I'm going to clean off a little bit, come in with a little bit of that Serpentine Genuine. We're doing it, we're easing into 2023, friends, with a little bit of messy watercolor. I hope you don't mind. Sue just asked, do you use a permanent ink stamp pad to stamp that moth? No, I didn't. I used the light spruce because all I really wanted was the moth to be in position, because we're going to paint another moth and put it over top of it. So I just wanted a position so that I knew where I wanted to put my watercolor. Okay, I've just dropped in some of those other greens. I'm also going to come in with some of those metallics. Now, talk a little bit about metallic. I have a bunch of metallic paints, different pans from different, some of these are handmade, some of them are just from different sets. You could use any metallic that you have. You could even use a metallic pen in the end. But I really like, this is from Schminke, but there's lots of different metallic watercolors. And all I'm doing right here is I just want to drop some of those metallic into some of these little wet spots. And it's just going to be, we're going to do most of our metallic on the actual thing that we're painting. Now I'm going to let this dry a little bit. We're going to let this dry and we're going to move on. I'm just going to take a little bit and just dab off some of that excess. But look at those colors. Yeah, Sue said she's surprised that this didn't run. Well, one of the reasons why is I didn't use a distress ink, and if it ran, that would be okay. I used, look, let me just backfill. Look at this backwash here. I'm just kind of having fun with some of those drips. Open up that floodgate a little bit. Let that drip there. Okay, I use light spruce, and it is water-based, and it should get a little bit, you know, drippy, but I did just kind of let it dry just a little bit to work with it. But again, we're going to be covering this. So we're going to be covering it. See the one underneath it? So it's a little bit washy underneath it, but that's okay. All right, I'm going to leave this be. I'm going to actually just hit that with a little bit of water. And I'm going to leave this be and let this dry. Now, these, look at all that granulation in watercolor. I talk about granulation in my Watercolor Wonderland class. And I'm going to talk about it again here. The paints that we're using, the Cascade Green, a lot of the Daniel Smith paints, especially the paints from the Primatech line, are extra fine watercolors that have like granulated rocks and pigments and different things in them. So when they dry, they end up being, you can see how the pigment has separated, and then you get all these really great texture effects. So we're going to let this dry. I'm going to move this up here. And yeah. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and get started on painting the Luna and just kind of talk through some of those things. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of turning off something that just came on. You heard that ding. Okay. Now, I'm going to work with the Inktense first, and then we're going to do a little bit of watercolor over it. And I'm going to just work in each one of these leaves. Oh, what happened here? Sorry about that. That's weird. Okay. And work in each one of these leaves. We got a few little techie issues today, don't we? Okay. All right, I have a very small brush. This is a Princeton Aqua Elite brush. You can see I didn't even take the tag off of it yet. This one was also a Princeton Aqua Elite. I'm just kind of trying out some new brushes in the new year to see how I feel about them. So we're going to do a little bit of both things here. I'm going to start with the, that color just bled a little bit. I use light spruce because eventually all of the greens that I'm using are going to make this, those lines disappear. If you want to do this with black and you want your black lines to show, that's when you're going to need to use a permanent a permanent ink or use like an amalgam. I would use obsidian or jet black. But I'm going to have these lines. These lines are going to disappear with the green. So we're going to go ahead and get started with doing a little bit of wet on wet. So my brush is wet. I'm going to paint some water. That's why I'm using this very, very thin brush. I'm going to paint some water into that very top part of the Luna. And I'm not just painting, I'm leaving a little bit of white there. And I'm going to go in with the Cascade Green first. Ooh, that was a little bit much. And I'm just going to drop it in and let it flow. Drop it in and let it flow. This is one of the beautiful things about watercolor. And I know many of you have been around and have watched me talk about it. And I say this kind of the same things over and over. Watercolor goes with the flow. It only goes where the water is, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and do the opposite side. And that technique, we're doing a mixture of techniques today just to have some fun and to ease back into 2023. And I've been working on all the different things that I want to share this year, how I'm going to go about sharing them. Okay, so I'm just adding a little bit of water. I'm painting in the water into that top of that wing. And I'm just going to drop this in. Drop this in. Loving it, loving it, loving it. Let it do its thing. Daniel Smith watercolors. I don't know. They're kind of one of my super faves. I love all watercolors. I know I say it all the time. Like all these different watercolors that I use are kind of my super faves. But these really are pretty beautiful and pretty amazing. All right, now I'm going to skip over a little bit. And I'm going to do Cascade Green here and Cascade Green here. But this next one, I'm going to do wet on dry. So I'm doing a little bit of a mixture of techniques today. The brush is wet, the paper is dry. I'm lifting up my pigment, and I'm going to paint it straight in. And you can see that the paint is at full strength, right? It's at full strength. So if we're talking about water ratios, it's little water, a lot of pigment. I call it whole milk, full strength. So I'm only going to paint a little bit right here. Clean my brush really good. And then, ooh, this brush holds a lot of water. And then just use what I have here and pull that pigment out. This brush, these Aqua Elites hold a lot of water. So I get an intensity of color right down here, and I'm using what's on the paper, and I'm just pulling it out to the edge a little bit. So I get a little bit of variation from light to dark. Okay, I'm going to do that on this side. So that's, again, my brush is wet, my paper is dry. So wet on dry. Whoops, forgot to pick up my pigment. I'm going to use some Cascade Green here. And just kind of paint that out. So we have a lot of intensity, a whole milk intensity of color. Okay, now I'm just going to rinse my brush, dab it off a little bit because these brushes hold a lot of water and I really only want a little bit. I'm moving my piece around. I'm a lefty, as everyone knows, and I want to make sure you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just taking that pigment, the brush is wet, the paper is dry, and I'm drawing it out to the edge here. So we get that dark to light thing going. Woo! I love that Cascade Green. It's such a good Luna Moth color. All right, I'm going to come in here and do these. Whoopsie! And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do a little bit of wet brush, dry paper. Come on in. Now, I'm using both pan and tube for this. You can see I have a lot of that a lot of those 3 colors out on this little palette. And I've had that palette for several years with those colors in it. And yeah, love it. They just reactivate. Ooh, a lot of water. They just reactivate. Kathy just said, I'm in heaven, so much fun to watch. Susie said, yay for lefties. Yes, yay for lefties. Okay. Got that dark full strength of that watercolor, that whole milk. And I'm just blending out what I have on that paper all the way out to the edge. That's what makes watercolor is a very efficient medium. I'm holding my Inktense pencils in my hand like I'm gonna lose them or something. Let's drop those. It's a very efficient medium in that you need very little to get those beautiful watercolor effects. All right, I want that to be a little more intense. So I have a lot of paint. This Cascade green color, oh boy, I just love it. It's got, like I said, it has like a vintagey green. I always call it like the 1950s green because it's like a blue green. It can be used so well. I'm just kind of pulling that out a little bit. When it dries, you get a mixture of greens and blues, and that's what just kind of makes me really happy with this whole composition here. I see a little something up here I want to kind of move around. Okay, now, even after this watercolor dries, we can reactivate it. I can reactivate it and use it. I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to move down to here. Cherie just asked a really great question. Cherie, are watercolor names the same across brands? Really good question. And the answer is no. The answer is it really depends on the brands and it really depends on the colors. Like Cascade Green is a Daniel Smith thing. You're not going to find that color. You might find those 2 pigments, the pigments that are used. And let me show you the pigments. It's PBR7 and PB15. You might see those 2 colors mixed in another brand, and actually Schminka's Super Granulating Colors has that mix. You might see them mixed in another brand, but it won't be called that. So there are some colors that tend to be the same, like cadmium yellows or lemon yellow. Like some common names get used, but more often than not, they don't. So really their colors, if you're really interested in, like, for example, if you like this PB15 and you know that pigment is something you really like, you would look in another brand for that same pigment, and I guarantee you it wouldn't look the same. And the reason why is because of the way they mill them. So some of the pigments are finely milled and like ground really fine, and then some of them aren't. Like in these granulating colors, the pigments aren't super fine. They're big and chunky, so that when they separate, and let's show you, like when they separate, you start to see all of the pigments that are in it. So this Cascade Green has 2 pigments, so when the colors separate, you can see both pigments in the color, and that's kind of what makes it unique and super fun. I hope that answered your question. Again, I went a little far and almost nerded out a little bit. Okay, this bottom, I'm going to come in with some light, no, do I want to do Bamboo Green? I'm going to come in with some light olive, okay? And I'm going to do a little bit of Inktense work right here along these lines. I'm also going to cover up this piece, this part. Well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. We'll see. I'm going to cover up this spot right here. And I'm just coloring in a little bit of this Inktense. And I'm going to blend that out. Now, when I'm using Inktense pencils with watercolor, I tend to use the Inktense first. And the reason is, when it dries, it's permanent. so I can layer watercolor over top of it, and this color won't move underneath it. So I'm just going to take a little bit of water with this wet brush and activate that color, and just go ahead and blend this out a little bit. Just using that color and blend it out. I'm going to go over this little detail in the Luna. There we go. I'm just going to blend this out. The other thing I like about using the Inktense with watercolor is that I get some of that extra texture. And Inktense has its own set of pigments in it, and they tend to be very granulating as well. So our conversation today is kind of turning into a little bit of a pigment slash granulation conversation, but that's okay. It's just kind of one of the fun things about watercolor that make you want to know and kind of understand, like, why do I see some of those pigments? See those pigments? And you can start to see the pigments separating in the Cascade Green, and that really does give us a lot of extra texture and dimension. Ah, loving it. Okay, I'm going to blend this out to like white. So I'm going all the way out to my edges here with that Inktense. I'm going all the way down and adding that water, getting that water in that bottom part of my Luna here. Then I'm going to come in with Serpentine Genuine, and I'm going to add some of that. Ooh, let's bring this in. I've got a lot of color. You can even see in the pan. I'm going to turn it this way. You can see how the pigments are separating a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of that to my palette, clean off my brush, and then just kind of drop this in, dropping this in the wet areas, and just kind of letting it do its thing. Mixing those two together and just letting them play. Love, 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 love. Let them play together a little bit. Let me move that out. And I'm going to come in a little bit here. Just kind of go over it. Now that Inktense is not going to move. Me adding the Serpentine Genuine on top of the Inktense just intensifies. It's called glazing, although I didn't let it wait. I didn't wait for it to dry. I'm layering it on top to get a little more intensity of color. Oh my gosh, I just really love the way. Look at the yellows that are popping out of there. We've got that intensity of the Inktense here, and I've just added a little bit of that Serpentine Genuine. Just going to kind of go up to my edge here a little bit. And that Serpentine Genuine is separating. So we've got that granulation. Oh, love it! Okay, now I'm going to come in. I'm going to do a little bit of an Inktense. Mix my beach green. Oh, I wrote bamboo green. Beach green and dark aquamarine. I wrote bamboo green. If anybody took a picture of this, this is supposed to be beach green. My brain. Okay. I'm going to come in right here. I've got this little part of the wing. I'm going to come in and just do a really light application of the blue. Let's flip this way. A nice little application of the blue right here. Also down here I did the Inktense first and then did a little bit of watercolor over it. I'm gonna do the opposite in a moment and just kind of show you what it will look like to do the Inktense over top of the watercolor. I'm going to do it over the Cascade Green. That color is really intense, and I don't need that much. I'm just using what's here. I'm applying the water to it just to kind of activate it, using what's here and just going out to the edge of the paper here. Just drawing that out to the edge of the paper. That little pop of blue is just going to kind of give it a little bit of, give the Luna a little bit of mystery, a little bit of magic. Yes. Okay. All right. Loving that. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to come in. We're going to go back to watercolor and do this. I'm going to come in with my Serpentine Genuine, which is a little bit more of an olivey like, yeah, a little bit more of an olivey like color. I was kind of changing up my mind a little bit. My pigment, I'm lifting up some pigment. Wet, my brush is wet, the paper is dry, and I'm going to do this little wing, part of the wing right here. So it applies really, really dark. You can see. I'm going to go over to this side and apply this side too. And I'm going to need to work a little bit quicker because I did both sides. Cleaning off my brush. Brush is wet, paper's dry, and I'm just going to pull that color out. So we're kind of, doing a little variegation of light to dark on these wings. But because of these greens, because of how well they go together, you can see that they have a lot of, they complement each other. But there's also good contrast there. The whole composition of the moth is going to come together just beautifully. Just beautifully. Okay. And we've got some of that variegation from dark to light. Oh, I'm loving that. Loving it. You can start to see how the Cascade Green has dried back. And you can see some of the, oh, I've got lots of little fingery things on here. You can see how it's granulated. Oh, I'm loving it. Okay. Now, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go up here. And I'm going to go in with some of that Serpentine Genuine. No, Green Apatite Genuine. Take a quick drink here. Excuse me. Brush is wet, paper's dry. And I'm going to go over, I'm just going to paint over that detail that I have in there, which is like the eye detail. I'm going to paint over that. I'm going to use what's here and just kind of bring it all out to the edge. So I'm concentrating a lot of my dark color in this kind of center part, and then letting the color just kind of bleed out to white on the outer edge. I've got a lot of pigment here. Let's just go ahead and get some of that pigment on here. So you can start to see that the stamp lines are disappearing because we're stamping very similar colors. I mean, we're painting in very similar greens that are just kind of helping those the outer edges or some of those stamp lines disappear. You can still see it, but that's okay. I think it adds to it. I think it really adds to it. Yeah, you can see how the water, Wilma just said it's really magical how the water flows. So it is. Look at that. Look at the green separating right there. You can see it right there. We've got a little bit of that burnt sienna pigment in there. You can see it right there, how it's separated. And that granulating watercolor just gives your whole project, I'm just adding a little bit right here, a little bit more texture. And for a Luna moth or a butterfly, I think for this stamped image, it just really adds a little bit extra to it. Okay, now I'm going to let some of this dry. Now for this part of the wing, I'm going to come in with a little bit of gold and paint that whole thing gold. And let's just see what that looks like, right? Let's get some good pigment on my brush here. in the Watercolor Wonderland class I have a whole little module on metallics because they're really fun to add to your project. So I'm just adding a little bit of gold right here. And hello, Catherine. She just came in a little bit late, but no worries. You can always catch everything on the replay. All right, I'm adding the gold here. Super fun. And I am going to add some more metallics, but I just kind of wanted to add a little bit of gold right there just to kind of give it a little extra. Now I'm going to go to the center body here, and I'm going to use Cascade Green, which is that beautiful, beautiful color. Look at that Cascade Green once it's dried. Look at all those colors. You get like a turquoise, a little bit of black coming out in the granulation. It's just juicy. Now I've got a full strength here, and I'm just adding quite a bit to the head. Cleaning off my brush. Not too wet, but just wet enough. And then just using the pigment that I have painted on here and drawing it down to the bottom. Using this brush is pretty helpful because it's a pretty fine brush. Letting that watercolor flow, go with the flow. Now, one of the other things I want to point out is that if you're watercoloring and things feel like a little bit dark to you, like that whole center body might feel a little bit dark. When it dries, when watercolor dries, it shifts. So it shifts back a little bit. So all of this may feel like a little bit dark, but it will shift back. But if you don't like what you have, you can always take your brush and remove some of it and bring back some of the white of the paper. So you see I'm just lifting. This technique is called lifting. I'm just lifting up and out away from some of the pigments. Cherie just asked, what size of the brush are you using? I'm using a number 3. A number 3. This is a really small, kind of fine brush. Now I'm going to take a little bit of that pigment. It's a really good fine tip. Just follow the line that I drew for the antenna and just kind of paint that in and paint that in at 100% strong. Okay. Now, she's almost done. Loving the Inktense. I want to come in on the top here, and I want to add just a touch of the Inktense Dark Aquamarine. Now, down here in the bottom part of the wing, we used Inktense first, and then watercolor because it won't shift, because the ink won't move. Now, over here, I have a very, very light wash of that Cascade Green because on the top part of this wing, we did a wet into wet technique where everything I painted in water and then I let the watercolor flow. So I want to add a little bit of intensity and bring back some of that just kind of like blue right here at the base here of this top part of the wing. So I'm just adding a little bit of Inktense. Not going to need a lot. I could just leave it and let that texture be what it is, but I'm going to go ahead in and I'm just going to add a little bit of water to it. And it is intense. Now I have to be very gentle as I'm moving out to the outer edges because the watercolor that I already have on the paper is going to reactivate and it's going to start to move, which is why I love watercolor, because you can always just have a little more fun with it and get things to move. So I'm going to go over here to this side. Ooh, about a little bit of water, and I'm moving that color a little bit. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to move some to the outer edge and just let that Inktense blend with that Cascade Green. So I've got a little bit more of an intensity in right here near the wing. I'm going to go ahead and blend this out a little bit. I had a little bit of a A little bit of of the granulation just kind of puddled and pooled there. So kind of cool. All right, loving that. Got a little bit of that shine. Look at the colors that are coming out because of the granulation in the pigments and the mixture with the Inktense. This is what I love about it. Okay. I am going to go ahead and die cut her out because we're ready to move on to the next step. All right, let me run her through the die cutter. And, oh, she's so pretty. This time I'm going to put a little tape down so we can make sure we cut her correctly. I tend to wing it when I'm cutting things. So let's go ahead and cut her out. She is so pretty. So, so pretty. Okay. Here she is. All right, we're back. Here she is. So she's cut out. I'm going to bring her up. Let's look at her colors. Oh, she's so pretty. Oh, a little bit wonky. Got a little bit wonky, but that's okay. All right, I'm going to bring the card base in. She's going to lay over top of this. But before I do that, I want to bring in my Leafery because we're going to put some Leafery behind her. So I'm using, let's get my big block here. I'm using a couple pieces of Leafery from the different sets. And I've already pre-cut some, but I want to show you how I stamp them out. I've got the big piece of Leafery. All of these different Leafery pieces go in different directions, which make it kind of fun. And some are solid and some are line art. So that's going to give us a lot more contrast with our project. Let me move my paints out of the way here. I'm using dark spruce and jelly bean green, and I'm going to mix these two colors up. So I'm just coming in with a little bit of jelly bean green and going across the center here. And I've got it across some of it. I'm going to come around and add a little bit of the dark spruce. And, oops, my hand touched it. Add a little bit of the dark spruce. Move the jelly bean green that I just stuck my finger in. Yay! Now, instead of spray, I'm going to spray the paper. This is another piece of watercolor paper. I'm just spraying the paper a little bit, getting it a little bit wet. And then I'm going to stamp these down into it. And I could have just went ahead and stamped them straight up and it would have been fine. But I kind of wanted to activate some of the water-based ink and get a little bit more of a washi look. So that is a little more intense than I wanted it to be, but this one. But see how you get that little bit of a washi look? And it's totally dependent on how much water you put on the paper. You could easily spritz your stamp and get that same effect if you're working quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and move these aside. I had already pre-stamped some of these, the Leafery. And we're going to go ahead and use those. Kathy just said, I love how you mix the colors right on the stamps. Yes, because I want to get that washi kind of effect. And that might feel a little scary to some, but that's okay. Give it a try. Give it a try. Okay, we did this first, right? So remember how I just used some water and I dropped in that color? Look at that that serpentine, no, that green apatite genuine. You see how those colors separated. You can see the cascade green blues in here. This is still a little bit wet at the bottom. But I've got that washy kind of look and feel. And when we put this on top, we've got a contrast. We're using the same colors. So we've got a nice contrast going. But we're going to just put this little 3D element. Got a little bit of foam tape here. I'm going to try to grab, I've got all these little extra pieces sitting. I'm going to try to grab a few little pieces here, and we're going to concentrate them on the body of the moth. Yeah, and go from there. Okay, Concentrate a little bit of the body. And I'm not putting any glue anywhere else. Boop. Just kind of. And then I'm going to lay this over top. So the reason why we stamped that there, it gave me that guide for where I was going to put her on the paper. So Kathy just said, I always thought that the separation of colors was because of the paper. No, it's because of the it can be because of the paper sometimes if you have really inexpensive paper, or but it's always because of the paint and the pigments, and it being a granulating paint. So super fun. All right, I'm loving that. Look at that gold. Do you see that gold that we dropped in there? Oh, love it. A little bit of subtle shimmer and shine. All right, I've got some of my Gina K glue, and I'm going to just go ahead in and, oops, a little bit of a big bloop of glue there. It's okay. Friends, we are finally getting some sun here in Maryland. I'm going to go ahead and pop this underneath here and let it overlap with the bottom of the wing. We're finally getting some sun here in Maryland. It has rained for like 3 days straight. It's been crazy. Crazy weather. Okay, adding a little bit of that glue underneath here. I'm going to pop this underneath here. Just kind of give that a little lift. It's under there, but it's just kind of lifted a little bit, so we've got a little extra texture and dimension. The wing is on there, but look, she's moving. So she's kind of like a little pop-up. Now I've got all these little wingy things. I'm calling them wingy things, but they're leafery, that are going to act like little wingy things. I'm just going to pop a few here. Just pop one here. Maybe pop this little one over here. See how I like it. And I'm just popping them underneath here. And this is just going to add a little bit more texture, because we've got this little wing going. Oh, I'm digging it. I've got this last one. I've got 4 on here. Not really sure I want to put another one on. I think I'm going to leave it. Look at me experimenting, seeing what I want. We'll save that for another project. Okay, now we're not finished because I want to add a little bit more stamping. I've got this galaxy of stars here. Love this stamp. Where's my block? Not sure where I put the block. Oh, hello everyone. We have some people popping in. That's okay. No worries about being late. That's the beautiful thing about these lives, is that we always have the replay, right? Okay, now I want to add a little bit of a galaxy of stars right here on the bottom over top. I'm going to take my, I said jelly bean green earlier, friends, but it's not. It's grass green. Let's go ahead in. I'm going to ink this up. Grass green. And then I'm just going to, I'm hitting it with a little bit of water. Just a smidge. Just a smidge of water. Just to kind of activate it. And then I'm going to go like this. I'm using the bottom of that wing as my guide. And then just doing my trail of stars. Stamping my trail of stars. And letting it be a little bit washi. And it's just adding a stamped layer over top of a watercolor layer, so we get more texture and dimension and a little bit more champagne, right? Okay. I'm going to come in with a little bit of this gold. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to just do a little finishing here. We're getting really close to the end. And I knew we would run over a little bit because there was a lot of watercoloring today, but that's okay. If you have to go, no worries. You catch it on the replay. I'm going to do a little bit of splatter here and splatter in some of this gold. I'm just going to add some gold, right, to some of the watery spots. Just a little bit of brushing in some gold talking about these metallics today. Clean my brush. Brush in some gold here. And look, I'm making that color. So I stamped these out with the grass green. Everybody saw me, but look, I'm adding a little bit of water. Ooh, is that moving? I'm adding a little bit of water there, and you can reactivate your Gina K inks. Just add a little bit of water to it with a brush, and you can get them a little bit washy. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna come in because I want to do a little bit of a white splatter on this baby too. I've got some Dr. Peach Martin's Bleed Proof White. Friends, this container is, I don't know, probably 15, 18 years old. And it looks like it's dead inside. But you know what? It's not. You just kind of dig in there a little bit. You're able to get a little bit out and continue to use it. It's got this. You know how when you have something in your freezer that gets freezer burned and it gets like crystallized? That's kind of what happens to this Dr. P.H. Martin's white. And people will think, oh, it's dead. It's just, I didn't use it. It dried up. But look, it's water-based. You can just reactivate it. All right. And now I'm coming in. And the reason why I'm using this one, you could use a white acrylic paint. I need a little more. You could use a white acrylic paint if you want. You could use a white gouache. The reason why I'm using this one is because I noticed it hadn't gotten any love lately. And it was getting all freezer burned, right? So to speak. And I really do love the intensity of the whites that I get from it. Okay. All right. I think we're almost done. I was thinking about adding sequins, but I'm going to let it ride the way it is and leave it be. Let me just kind of tidy up a little bit here so I don't get my card in the mess. And we can take a quick peek at the card and the finishing effects. Look at the golds. Loving that gold splatter. Loving that metallic. It is a subtle sheen. And we did a little bit of gold painting in here that just kind of made it super fun. Loving the way this looks. So here's the deal. This is a card, right? But you could also like pop this into a little 5x7 frame and you've got a painting. And you've got a little home decor. How fun would that be? Totally fun. Oh, love it. Okay, I'm going to pop back to the front camera and just kind of talk a little bit about a few things. Hello. I'm excited about today. Getting back into 2023, getting back into sharing more technique tutorials and just a lot of things. So I'm working on a lot of things, and I'm working on a regular schedule of things as well, and more content. I do have a Gina K Designs release coming out January 17th. I'm super excited. We're all super excited for this new release. And I'm just excited to be able to come in here and share. I'm just so grateful to all of you for joining me today. A couple things I want to share. If you are at all interested in all things Lisa Hetrick and tutorials and all the things that I share, and you don't mind, you can hop on my email list if you're already on there. Thank you so much. I do send out an email 3 to 4 times a month, so usually once a week, and it shares when I'm going live. I'm not always sure if you see things in social media or even in our social media groups. I do post that information there, and I do post it on my blog as well. But the email comes out and it lets you know when I'm going live, when my classes are launching, when things are launching in the shop, when my new releases are happening. So you'll be the first to know, and it like pops right into your inbox. Also, I have a free community. I moved my community off of Facebook and into my classroom. My classroom is at craftyourjoy.com. I have a free community where I am putting content, and that's where I'm putting it. It's going on my blog, and it's going in there. So I'm not putting it on Facebook in the group anymore. And this year I'm planning to put just content that's only going to be there. So, a couple things just that I wanted to share with you. I have some really fun plans for tutorials and really taking deeper dives into techniques, into smaller tutorials over the next couple weeks and months. So, if you're on my email list, you're going to start to see some of that information coming out. So, okay. Um, yeah, we went a little bit over. I went 5 minutes over. Boo. But I'm just so grateful that you could all join me today. And there were so many of you here today at this different time. I am trying different times. I really like doing the Wednesday lives, but because this week was a little bit weird, um, I didn't. I did it on Thursday instead. And I do like doing it on Fridays as well. So I am working out some of those times and things. So if you have, um, any feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Okay. And I'm seeing everybody pop in and also talk about the free community. Yes, I'm posting in there. There's lots of free stuff already in there, but I'm posting inspiration. I'm posting thoughts on art supplies, and I've got plans for that area. I also have, all of my courses there. And if I'm offering discounts for my courses or anything in my shop, it's happening on my email list or in that community. Again, because I'm not really sure if everybody's seeing things in social media, and social media can be kind of cluttery sometimes. So I'm trying to find a way to get my message directly to you in a meaningful way that's useful to you and brings a lot of value to you. So, okay, have a great Thursday. And yeah, tomorrow's Friday and we'll be heading into the weekend. I hope you get an opportunity to get out some of your stamps and watercolor. Give today's techniques a try. And as we head into the weekend, I hope you get a little time to craft your joy. So I will see you next week, and I will be sharing what that tutorial is going to be in my email list, and I will put it in socials as well. So I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time, friends. Thanks so much for joining me.